AA Beyond Belief is a podcast by, for, and about people who have found a secular path to sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. So a couple weeks ago, I ran across this website, secularovereaters.org, and I was blown away, not just by how well designed and useful the site was, but how much thought was given to providing a resource for people seeking a secular path in Overeaters Anonymous. And later, when discussing the virtual ICSA conference online, I met Jim D., who happens to be from that Overeaters Anonymous group. And I wanted to talk to him, so I asked him to come on the podcast so he could share the story of how all this came to be. And he asked me to invite Jenne, and I'm glad I did, because Jenne is the person that designed and put that site together, which is absolutely amazing. So welcome to you both. Welcome to AA Beyond Belief, Jenne and Jim.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I'd like to know the story of how all this happened. And maybe a good way to begin is to learn your own individual stories about how you got involved with Overeaters Anonymous and how that eventually got you to the point where you would want to start a secular meeting. So who would like to begin? Where should we start?
I think we should start with Jim because he's been in OA longer than I have.
All right, Jim.
Yeah, my dear Alphonse. Actually, in Overeaters Anonymous, I'm a particular kind. There are all kinds of people in it. I got a little bad treatment. My mom was in a tough place. My dad was just back from combat in the South Pacific. And I got a little harsh treatment early on. I was a skinny little kid. I was an athlete. I didn't really have a problem with food. Many people in OA talk about having a problem with food really from the get-go, you know. Mine, I was an athlete, so I ate a lot, but I was active. And I turned to alcohol when I was second half of my senior year and was a blackout binge drunk for, 7 or 8 years. Played football in college. Ended up joining the Marine Corps like my dad had. And it was only when I came back from combat that I realized I had another year to do. I had volunteered to go in. And when I reported back for duty, I just switched from drinking to overeating. We can talk about how it was a pretty serious drinking thing that I did, but I didn't go to program to switch it. So I just switched over to eating. But I put on about 70 pounds in a year and a half, and I've been fighting for 50 years to get it off and keep it off. And in 1988, after about 20 years of that, actually, that's not interesting. I went to one OA meeting early and didn't stick. And then about 1988, I joined, and I've been coming to at least a couple of meetings a week ever since. And it's been hard because I was an atheist always. That's my mixed politics too much, but I'm a social change activist type person. And so it was always a struggle. I mean, I had a sponsor who'd been in forever, abstinent, we call it forever, told he really believed that God had written the big book, that science had proved, he told me, I've got a PhD, science has proved that Bill W. could not have written it, so it had to be written by God.
Uh-oh, that guy's dangerous.
Well, and so it's been a struggle for those years. But on the other hand, probably a lot like AA, I've been to a few AA meetings, and I've got my own drunkalog. But, I went to that OA meeting, and it was like, people were talking about eating food out of trash cans and eating until they threw up and eating when they shouldn't, just having that craziness around food. So I knew from the minute I walked in that I was an overeater and that these were my peeps, as they say these days. And so I've kept going to meetings and struggling with the God bit. I've had trouble maintaining abstinence, I think in part because of that. It was hard. How could I identify with a group of people who I, had oftentimes really strange thoughts about? And so it was wonderful to find your website and to begin to learn about the secular community in AA. My dad was in AA for 35 years. And a woman friend of mine from activist life, I said, she'd, "Oh, geez, you're looking good, Jim. You lost a lot of weight." And I said, "Well," and she said, "How'd you do?" And I said, "Well, in OA." And she said, "Oh, I can't do that. It's all about God." And I said, No, there are secular meetings, the AAs, there are 100 of these meetings. You can do it. And she said, "Oh, great. Is there one around here?" I said, "No." And she said, "Well, you'll start one for me, won't you?" And so I did. And she's now been pretty much clean on her food for over a year. And I think this is the third, I've started 3 meetings in the last year or so. And finally being able to do service above kind of the group level.
Yeah.
They say in OA, we say service is slimming, which isn't kind to anorexics and bulimics because we have all kinds of different eating crazinesses. But it is the fact that I'm now involved in trying to set up meetings and work with people more because it's a group of people I can relate to and identify with has been a big thing. And, you deserve a lot of, credit for that. I appreciate your being there. And I guess just to segue it a little bit, unless you want to go further in mind, to Jenne, at one point I went on the OA website, there is a drop down. OA.org is the main OA website. And there is a listing for meetings for atheists and agnostics. And at one point, I just went, after I had started to set one up, maybe in the process, I looked at there were like 5, I think 4 of which turned out to be active at the time. And I called up Jenne just to say, hey, you're listed as a contact for one of these meetings. I'm listed for another. And that's how I got connected with Jenne. And
so Jenne, you started a meeting separate of the meetings that Jim was running?
No, maybe I'll just talk a little bit about my background with my compulsive eating. And I was also like a regular size child. I didn't have like a weight issue, but I always considered myself to be, now looking back, a sugar addict. Like sugar was my main thing. I mean, I'd go trick-or-treating, I'd eat that bag of candy within 24 hours. And my family, felt like sugar's unhealthy, so it wasn't around a lot. And anytime we would get into the house, like the whole family would just binge. We'd take like, the half gallon of ice cream, there were 4 of us, and divide it into 4 bowls and eat the whole thing. We all had, the sugar thing, but, my mother really tried to keep us away from that. And I come from a family of addicts. I've got one grandparent on either side who's an alcoholic. My dad was an alcoholic. My grandmother was probably 200 pounds overweight. So the addiction, gene is just in there. And I started having a real problem with sugar in particular when I hit 30 and my relationship dissolved. I had been kicked out of the family by my mother. We had just had like a big earthquake in California and things were like up in the air. It was a really tumultuous time. And when I moved out from the apartment I was sharing with my partner, I just started taking care of myself by eating and sugar, junk food, whatever. And I just gained a ton of weight. And that kind of started 3 decades of dieting, going to therapy, talking about food, joining like, fat is a feminist issue kind of groups about food, just to try and, figure out how can I deal with this. And I just really thought it was that I didn't have enough willpower. I just, there's something really wrong with me. And I finally got to this really desperate point. I was 56, I'm 61 now, where I was so depressed by all this food stuff. And also so many physical things were happening. I was pre-diabetic. I had high cholesterol. I had horrible backaches. I had plantar fasciitis. I could barely, I couldn't move very well. I was really, physically and mentally sick at that point. And I had heard about OA, but I just felt like I can't do that. I had a real bias against 12-step programs to begin with. And also, I don't believe in God. I'm also a lifelong atheist, and it's just like, I can't do this. And, but I was desperate. And they say, these 12-step programs are the last house on the block. And I went, and the first meeting I went to was a big book study group. And I didn't know what the big book was. And I'm like, why are all these people with eating problems supposedly reading about alcoholics? I mean, this place is not for me. And I just like ran out of there. And luckily someone chased after me and said, you should try at least 5 other meetings before you decide whether OA is right for you. And I did. And one of those 5 meetings turned out to be this freethinker meeting that had already been started only like by a month or something. And the woman who started it based it off of a OA freethinker meeting in San Francisco. So there had been at least one other in San Francisco. And she had 2 meetings, and we met in her community room of her condo complex, and it started from there. Then she ended up moving to England after like 6 months. And so we had to find a new place to meet. And so this other man and I kind of like, took over trying to get our meeting started. And in the beginning, there were only like 2 to 4 people there. But I did not start. I can't take credit for starting that meeting, but I do take some credit for keeping it going.
So what's the main difference? I'm assuming OA is like AA. They open with prayers, close with prayers. Is that the primary difference between a secular OA meeting and a non-secular meeting?
I'll just say that in my meeting, we opened with a freethinker version of the 12 steps. We didn't know we weren't supposed to do this. I think, I did contact you about a year ago we almost got delisted over this.
Because you're reading those steps that you guys wrote yourself.
We didn't write them ourselves. They were previously written by the San Francisco group, and they got it from the San Francisco AA freethinkers. So we just changed the word alcohol to food or whatever in that. So they had already existed. So we didn't start with prayers or anything. One of the great things about that meeting, and sorry, Jim, I know I'm talking so much, was that the description said that it refrained from religious and patriarchal language. I'm like, this is the group for me. I'm a feminist, and I that's the other thing. I just couldn't take that language.
Yeah, the language from the big book. It is curious that OA would use the big book.
They don't use the big book everywhere. There are big book meetings, but then we also have literature that OA has since created.
Okay.
John, I do feel I wanted to give a little plug to OA in the sense that OA was started by a woman, Roseanne S., who went with a friend to a Gamblers Anonymous meeting and just claimed that it was like, wait a minute, this is me. It was about a different behavior. But she said, these people are about gambling the way I am about food. And so she hooked up with a guy, I forget, I think his name was Jim also. But from the beginning, she was an agnostic, and she wrote her own steps. And I was just looking at them. The original steps that she wrote, the 10th step was have a food plan, because for sobriety, it's different. You can just give up alcohol, but you can't give up eating. And so having some kind of a plan is pretty important. But anyhow, from the very beginning, here was this agnostic Jew who started this thing. And it was only when a couple of years later, there was some tension between her and the more religiously oriented folks. And they had this famous meeting where there were 5 religious folks and 4 psychology-based folks. And so they went with, they decided, well, we'll just use the AA 12 steps and substitute the word. And there have been agnostic or freethinker meetings in OA from the beginning. I was told by somebody in New York there was one in the 70s. From the 60s, that psychological group that originally got started, there were a number of, kind of psychologically based groups using the 12 steps, but, not talking about God or religion. And so it's always kind of been there. And by the time I went and went on that list, there were 5 that were listed. Some of them identify as unconventional spirituality and try and make an attempt to be more welcoming to people who don't fit into the Christian, Jewish kind of tradition, different pagan, North Native American, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever. And then the name we've sort of adopted is secular, and many of us are more atheist, more non-spiritual, more materialistic, psychological. And so there were 4, and 5. There were 5 listed, 4 that I could get in touch with, and counting me. And Jenny and I were just going over before this. There are now 14, and that's only really in the last year and a half or so, largely because of the Zoom meetings during the pandemic. So that people there aren't a lot of us, and we could find ourselves online, whereas creating a meeting from scratch face to face, is always a little bit hard. And OA is a much smaller fellowship than AA. They claim 6,500 meetings and 60,000 folks around the world.
So OA was never really resistant to the idea of a secularly formatted meeting. Oh. The expression is, "Oh no,
Jenny,
Jenny got some."
that's a softball for you.
No, so I mean, you can. I mean, we found out the hard way. We thought that we could use outside literature, so we were actually reading AA Agnostica's Do Tell. We would like read one of those stories like every week and have a discussion. And we were reading these, alternative steps, and we didn't know that we couldn't do this. And then after 3.5 years of doing this, somebody squealed on us to our, region chair, and then she talked to our intergroup person and said, is this true? And then he showed up at one of our meetings, and it's like, yes, it is. And we had like a 3 to 4 month long process where we were going to get kicked out of OA if we continued to do that. And they have a line that when you sign your group up, it says that you agree to practice the 12 steps and 12 traditions of OA. And we felt like we were practicing them. We weren't reading the exact version, but we were definitely practicing the intent. And it turns out that there are these bylaws and all this other stuff that you just don't know about, that like they bring to the forefront when this kind of stuff happens. And so, they told us that our choice, what the choice was, is that we could either read their steps, which there was no way we were going to do, or read no steps at all. And I'm like, this is a 12-step program. How can you get recovery if we're not even talking about the steps? And so we made the choice with our meetings. We have 2 free thinker meetings. We were 2 of the 4 that Jim was talking about. We decided that we would not read the steps, any of them. And we've actually splintered off, and we have like a non-OA approved step study group that we meet once a month, and we read other books and talk about alternative steps.
It's interesting about those steps. Our group, when we started our secular group in Kansas City, we did not open reading the steps either. However, we did have the traditional, regular, original 12 steps hanging on the wall, and we did for a long time until a woman came in who was so offended by just seeing the language that's written in those steps that we had to take them down because it made her so uncomfortable, and so we removed them, but we never really gave them much attention. They were just hanging on the wall because we thought that's what you do, right? You hang these steps on the wall,
John, the other thing I should give props to is I managed to find, just by accident, somewhat by accident, an agnostic atheist sponsor around the same time a couple of years ago. His name's Alan S., and it's very, very helpful. He tells a story. I mean, he's there are many stories in OA. He weighed 350 pounds. I mean, people who just really, there's a guy in one meeting I go to, 400 pounds this morning. But anyway, he tells a story of going to a meeting, walking in. It was in a Christian church. He was raised Jewish. They opened with a prayer. They talked about Jesus Christ being the road to abstinence. And he fled. He ran away, and he overate for another 7 years, 300 pounds, And then, I don't know why exactly, he went back to give it one more try. And this time, like me, he happened to go to that had that feeling, but he went to a meeting where it wasn't in a church. It didn't have the steps posted. And, he's been in for 35, 32 years now.
Yeah, it does make a difference to have an environment where someone's comfortable and where it's comfortable for everybody.
Well, yeah. And the other thing I wanted to add is kind of building on, we're early in this process relative to you. In other words, there have been other meetings, but they weren't ever connected, to my knowledge, with each other. And at some point, Jim will tell the story of the website, but, we're now trying to get together and how can we support each other? And I started a meeting where there aren't enough sponsors. We're getting all these new people and people who've relapsed who find out, oh my gosh, there's a secular meeting I can go to. And we don't have enough sponsors who are seculars. So I'm doing every Monday noon, we have a meeting where a different sponsor comes in and just talks for a while about a topic, one of the steps, or setting up a food plan. And so the notion of how do we relate to the larger fellowship is still a lot up in the air. And the approach that we've been taking, and it hasn't been, if I say it here publicly, somebody's probably listening, but what we do is we have our meeting for 45 minutes. And in one meeting, for somebody else wanted it, we actually do read conference-approved literature. In another, we don't read anything, we just share. And at the end of 45 minutes, you say, okay, the OA meeting is over. Now we're going to socialize, and we're going to socialize by doing the daily musing from Beyond Belief.
Oh, interesting. Clever.
We talk about a secular reading, and it, just open. You can always speak as a secular person in the first part, but we kind of keep a loose kind of, this is an OA meeting and we want to be a little thoughtful. And for example, I try and share our website in the last 15 minutes, because it has a variety of secular resources. Whether that compromise will eventually, it'll get up to the trustees, and how we don't know yet.
It is interesting how you had those meetings, but they were kind of independent of each other, not really aware of one another. And are you now kind of coming together? And is the website helping with that, Jenne?
Jenny,
sorry.
It's okay. I really think we have another member. It was Arlene, right, who started the OA Secular Forum, or you and Jim and Arlene did that?
We point the finger at each other, but yeah.
Yeah. So, it's like a Google group. So people that happened before the website. It's kind of like a bunch of us are we recognize that there's this huge need for secular people. So we're kind of acting a little bit independently, but then also, trying to act together. And we just did our Freethinker meetings, kind of started we did a Thanksgiving Thankathon where we invited all the people from all the meetings to come. And we had 47 people, and we are a West Coast group, and at least half of them were not in the Pacific time zone. I mean, they were from other places. And the other thing, I don't know if this is a segue or makes sense, but is that our meetings, our face-to-face meetings, we would have 8 to 12 people, and now we've got almost 40 every time. And these are people who are the one person in Arkansas, it's just everybody's coming together, and it's just really starting to bloom. And I mean, I hate that we're having this pandemic, but it's really helped our organization.
Isn't that interesting? I think that's true for the recovery community, and it's doing the same thing with the secular AA community as well. People are saying, oh, I can finally get to one of these meetings, or they're learning about these meetings for the first time. I think it's going to change 12-step culture, possibly.
I do want to put a footnote on. I would say we're pretty committed to staying in OA. I mean, here you got 60,000 people who are out of their minds about food. And, what are you going to do? Set up competition with Weight Watchers or something, advertising. So we found, there were a bunch of us who found recovery in OA. Some would put more emphasis on the 12 steps, and others would put more emphasis maybe just on the social support thing. But so we want to stay we contribute money to, we want to stay connected to the larger fellowship. But I can imagine that there are going to be, some tensions going forward, because I have a guy, we have this wonderful men's OA group. It's not agnostic here outside DC. And he says, if somebody guts clean on food using the 12 steps and with God in it, and here you come along, they think God saved them. And then here's a bunch of people come along and say, well, no, it's not God. There is no God, blah, blah, blah. They think, oh, well, they're trying to kill me. They're trying to kill people like me, and I have to kill them before they kill me. And this is somebody who's been at the highest level in OA things. And there'll be some tensions, but I'm optimistic. And that's why I love coming to this group and hearing about how you guys have figured out, although I noticed there is John H.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's funny. We have a whole group of people that want to leave AA, but they never actually leave. They just talk about how they want to leave. Okay. I have a question for. Go ahead, Jenny.
No, and I just wanted to say one
Jenny.
thing about the secularovereaters.org website is that for me, I really wanted to have a place where we could put non-OA approved things so that people could find them, because I am not able to find recovery with the material and the literature that is available in OA. It is so God heavy. It's telling you with, step 4, it's suggested that you get on your knees and pray to have, your defects of character removed. I mean, I can't take it. It's like, barf the whole time. And so really trying to find a way where people who are secular can find other resources, because I wasn't aware of these things, and I've been in OA for a long time. So just trying to make that available so that people can, it's just another tool for their recovery. And we were really clear that this website is not part of Overeaters Anonymous because, they say that you can't have any outside affiliations. And this is just, it's not. This is just a resource. It's not another organization, and it's not affiliated with OA. But we service the OA people.
Right. That's how I see AA Beyond Belief. It's a community of people who go to secular AA meetings, but it's not an official AA group or as a representative of AA or anything. But I want to ask you a question, which is kind of off topic, but it's always kind of fascinated me. So I've got a friend here in Central Missouri, and she is a member of Gray Sheeters in Jefferson City. And she was wanting to start a secular Gray Sheet meeting and was having some difficulty with that over here. But she was telling me the story. Did Gray Sheeters split from OA? What was the story behind that? Or am I confusing that with something else?
Well, I started out in 1988 in something that's called HOW.
Okay.
Honest, Open, and Willing from the Big Book. And they had the Gray Sheet. The first meeting I went to before that had the Gray Sheet. I think it was blue by 1988. And there was a real struggle in OA about whether you would require a particular food plan.
Oh, that's right. That's what it was. I forgot. That's right.
And so the resolution, as I understand it, and my sponsor was talking about, is I spent 16 years in the HOW version. There was kind of some people following the HOW, Gray Sheet, Blue Sheet, this is the food plan, this is the way you do it, split off. But OA itself has said that they won't require a specific food plan. And there's a pamphlet that proposes dignity of choice, several alternatives. You work it out with a nutritionist. Interesting, step 2, Jenny, in that original Roseanne Steps was you meet with a doctor and you figure out a food plan. That was her second step. But anyhow, so there are people who are still take that approach, but they can't require a food plan. So it kind of split. Some left and some stayed in. And it's funny. Again, this goes back to the difference between food and booze. Having had, some experience with both. You have in OA, you develop a food plan that works for you. Whereas in alcohol, it's not like you decide, well, I'll have only one beer a day, right? Or I can have a glass of wine twice a day, but not a glass. That's usually described as the last step before you hit the floor at the bottom. But with food in OA, so long as the idea is you come up with some plan that works for you. And try and follow that. You develop it with a nutritionist, with your sponsor. You take one out of the pamphlet. Might be low carbs, not three meals. Many people are just 3 meals a day, nothing in between. And so there is this thing in OA that's, I don't know, it's different than A, but where you have to. My sponsor always says, "What works for you?" You have to figure out what works and do that. But because it's food, you do have to. There's a little art to that, deciding we talk about red light foods, yellow light foods, green light foods. Like a red light, you can't ever eat it. Yellow foods, sometimes you can, but you got to be careful. Green lights, you can almost eat as much as you want. Although those of us who've been around for a while know that it's possible to get. I once had so many carrots in my diet that my skin turned orange. I had what's called carotene poisoning.
Oh no!
Fortunately, it's not harmful, but I I had an orange. I was orange for a little while. So you can eat too many of the green light foods also.
Yeah, the definition of like being sober in OA, it's, reframing from compulsive food behaviors. And that could just, be individual. I know like this one woman who chewed gum all the time, and it was like the sugar-free kind, and her guts were just being like torn apart, and it was just chomp, chomp, chomp. I mean, people, could be, and that's what her absence is. She doesn't chew gum anymore. So, and I don't eat sugar anymore. It's just like there are things that's like an alcoholic food.
But it gets us. I was writing that little list for you. It's you don't get as high, I wouldn't say, from overeating, but you really get crazy weird. You eat yourself into a stupor. I remember one time eating stale tortilla chips at a Mexican restaurant with my wife. We were watching a football game or something. And I ate so many of those things that I came home and threw up and threw myself into atrial fibrillation, because there's something about the vagus nerve and your gullet and stuff. You get high, you get into a stupor. We call it oftentimes a food coma. And I had a guy who was telling me, he was that way for 2 years in his basement, having pizza brought in every day, watching TV, binge watching Netflix, put on 100 pounds.
My first couple of years in the program, I had a good friend who went to AA meetings and also OA, but his primary addiction was food. And I ended up living with him for a little while, and so I got to understand him and his addiction pretty well. And it was, I don't know, it was a good experience. I'm glad I had that experience of getting to know him and appreciating what he was dealing with. But it was a very, very serious problem, life-threatening problem, and but he's doing well now. He ended up getting married and he's doing great. But I was with him during those very early days of his recovery.
And for people who are listening, my dad got sober in AA, saved his life, changed his life. And he went periodically to OA at the urging of his wife, who was also his pigeon, or whatever they call his sponsee. Not supposed to do that in AA. And he could not deal with the food. He died of a heart attack weighing 270 pounds. And I just want to, I know there's so many people in our OA meetings that are also in AA, or for whom they started off in AA and they go to OA. I just really want to invite, people who may be in AA, that's their primary or their initial addiction, to just, that they're welcome. It's okay if you feel like you're really an alcoholic and you just want to check it out or something like that.
Well, when I posted the website on our Facebook group, a lot of people were interested. I mean, there's a lot of members in our Facebook group who are overeaters as well as alcoholics. I think it's pretty common.
And now there's secular overeaters.
Well, thanks for the pitch.
Yeah.
When you were talking about this, how they didn't like you reading those other steps, it frustrates me a little bit that they lack the imagination or thought that there's another way of communicating the same principles and action, because that has always frustrated me with the people who give us a hard time, and there's not that many of them anymore. But it's like, we're doing the same damn thing. We're just explaining it differently.
What we got. Now, here's the thing is that I thought that OA and AA were the same. And I thought that, the way their organizational structure and stuff. And I thought that OA was like the little sister, and
that's what I kind of figured. That you just copied it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I found out that AA is actually a little more flexible about stuff. For them, anybody who wants to be a meeting is a meeting. That's part of your tradition 3. And tradition 4, group conscience decides, how you're going to run a group and what you do. In OA, the group conscience is, the meetings have some control, but the ultimate control are these trustees. They're like 9 of them, I think, who are at the top, even though they're supposed to be at the bottom of the food chain. They're at the top, and they've been selected, by the membership at large to represent our group conscience. So it's like these 9 people who are making these decisions for like everybody. But I mean, it doesn't probably come up that often. But what they said is that you are harming OA as a whole by using these other steps. And and then people were saying like, well, what if some group wanted to, say the Lord's Prayer during the meeting? And I'm like, well, then use group conscience. If like everybody in the group says, let's use the Lord's Prayer, then fine. Have a meeting that says we use the Lord's Prayer. If everybody in the meeting says we want to read alternative steps, then you vote on that and then you do that and you advertise it. You let people know that, before they get in there, this is going to be a little different. But they wouldn't go for that. They're just, we are going to take down the whole freaking OA structure by using these alternative steps. Never mind that we'd been using them for 3.5 years and nothing had blown up yet. I'm furious. Can you tell?
I can tell. No, it irritates me too, because it's just like, it just bothers me that they just can't see that, they can't appreciate it. I would think that they would appreciate the diversity, the diversity of thought. But anyway.
Well, the other thing is, I'm sorry.
Let me just go ahead, finish yours and let me then go after.
Okay, I just wanted to say that for me, the bottom line is recovery, or should be recovery. And if this is what some people need to recover, then you shouldn't be standing in their way, because there are so many people who are not coming to OA because of the God thing. I mean, I almost, it took me 25 years to get here because of that. And I'm just lucky that I got that desperate.
So to give a little other perspective, the trustees aren't paid. In other words, these are volunteers who kept the system that got me, although I've struggled with what we call abstinence, probably half of the time of those 30 something years I've been eating rationally, and it kept me from going above like 230. And they're just people. But they haven't had to deal with us because we've fled mainly, and so now we're coming back in. And like, we had a recent interaction with a trustee where she said that the word secular was an outside issue and therefore couldn't be discussed at an OA meeting, and now at the same time, they have a drop down on the main OA site, which lists atheist and agnostic meetings. So they're not, and they've always been there. So it's, it's a group of people who are, as volunteers, working hundreds of hours to keep this ship afloat for a long time. And yeah, they have to figure out how to deal with us. And they're not doing it perfectly smoothly. My apologies, Jenne. They treated that. And I'm a guy I suffered from this, as I won't say as comparative, but it kept a lot of, it made my life was worse for those 32 years because there wasn't a secular alternative, and nobody told me that there was, or that it would be okay not to worry about believing in God, or if the higher power really was just my group and you didn't like graduate from having your higher power as the group to actually believing in God. You just stayed with the fact that this is a peer supported group of people who have a similar problem and we're going to help each other work through it. Anyhow.
You know what I find kind of funny about that word secular? So here in KC, there were some people when we were starting our group, there were some people in our inner group who didn't like because at that time we were calling our meetings agnostic meetings. And they didn't like that because they said, well, that's like having a Baptist meeting, or that's like having, a different sort of meeting. Okay. So now everybody's very happy with the word secular. But to me, and that's great, but to me, it's like, okay, so if you're going to say that our meetings are secular, then that's by admission that your meetings are not secular and therefore are religious, So it's like you actually have the choice now between a secular meeting or a non-secular meeting. And the non-secular meeting, of course, are those that are praying and so forth. So I just find it funny because it's kind of like an admission, but I'm never going to say that, although they might hear it now. But that's always my opinion.
Well, we're still going through because the largest group actually predated either Jenne or me. On Sunday morning, there's a telephone group for unconventional spirituality. And most all the people in there are, as far as I can tell, are atheists or agnostics. But when they set up their meeting, they didn't have that choice as a way to identify. And so the best they could come up with was to call themselves in the spirituality category, but unconventional. And they have by far the largest number of people. I think their mailing list is like 200, and they've been going for 10 years. And it's very much a secular meeting. And yet there's a little bit of a struggle as to what, should we call ourselves unconventional spirituality or secular or free thinkers? And although we've got the website now, which they have to deal with a little bit, it's that there's still that tension around what we call ourselves, just as you're talking about now with secular and AA, even though you've come a long way. There isn't really a perfect word, that's going to do the job.
So, to wind things up, I guess, where do you see this going post-COVID? Do you think these secular meetings, the secular OA meetings in particular, you can have more of them? Are you going to have like the hybrid Zoom in-person meetings? What do you think?
I think that we're going to have more meetings, and then they're going to be Zoom. I think that it's very hard, because we're a smaller population. It's hard to get a critical mass in order to have a face-to-face meeting. So I think that these meetings are going to continue. I know my 2 freethinker meetings, initially it said that they wanted to go hybrid. I know personally, I don't know if I'm ever going to want to drive to that meeting again, and maybe I will, maybe I won't. But we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. It is convenient, isn't it?
Yeah.
Partially this is from reading your own Facebook and website and stuff. There is a desire for people to have face-to-face, for some people at least, to have face-to-face meetings. And we started out, the first meeting I set up, I and another sponsor, Linda S., who should get props, with Sue J., was a face-to-face meeting. And as Jenny said, it was like 4 people, 6 people, 8 people tops. And now we routinely have 20, 25. So I assume that some places, probably particularly urban areas, probably Northeast, West Coast, there may be some face-to-face secular meetings. But most of the meetings that we've set up now, we got people from Europe, from the West Coast, from the East Coast, and you can't meet in person. It's not an option. And I would assume that those will continue to meet. So it'll be a question of how many new face-to-face meetings or new hybrid meetings come out of it. But I think all the internet-based meetings will continue.
And I want to say that one of the things that we built into Secular Overeaters is that we have a Zoom account. We wanted to make sure that there would be a place where, Zoom meetings would be able to meet, because it's hard to come up with $149 to get your own account for a whole year. So we're offering like free slots to secular OA meetings, and we're having people take us up on that, and because we want to make sure that there's a way that this continues.
What? Go ahead. One of them in Germany.
Yeah, and we have one in Canada.
we didn't mention this earlier, but that discussion group is called OA Secular Forum at gmail.com. And if somebody sends an email to that address, you'll get an invitation from Arlene O, who is essentially one of the very big in that unconventional Sunday meeting, but has really been an important leader in the work that we're doing here as well. But that's a way to connect.
I'll be sure to put that in the show notes when we publish this. And
there is another website for people who are trying to be, if you're in OA and you want to have just a clean sort of secular thing, called secularoa.org. But so just like Jenny said, the Secular Overeaters has all the secular resources. The other one is a more narrow one that we can use in an OA setting and not have to worry about somebody coming after us because we're referring to don't tell or do not tell. And it's a woman named Vicky who really created that, who deserves a lot of props also. But of all the things that we've mentioned, the simplest way to get connected is to go to secularovereaters.org.
when we post this podcast, which will be at the end of December, I'm going to also at the same time do like a video screen capture taking people on a tour of this website because I like it so much. And I kind of get a kick out of doing that kind of stuff. I did something like that fairly recently. So, but it's a really great site. And when I was going through it too, I could tell that you were being careful not to identify it as official, Overeaters Anonymous, and calling it secular Overeaters and Friends. It's just a beautiful site. It's got a lot of great information on there. You did a really good job with that, Jenne. Really did.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I had a lot of help. We had a lot of editors and web people. Jim and I are like on this team with Matt and Mark and Arlene and Alan, who kind of started like, let's do this. And we did fundraising, and we have, Laura, who's in charge of our, Zoom rooms, and I can't even remember everybody's name right now, but we've got there are a lot of people who have participated. I kind of did like the wrangling and getting people in, and also have a background in editing and in web design. So, this is and I'm retired, so this is like a perfect project for me. And another thing that I really like about it is the artwork, which is all collage stuff about, going through 12-step programs right now we just have 4 different artists up there, but I don't know. I just was over the sunsets, so.
It's nice. Well, I am going to do that. So thank you both so much. It was a great experience speaking with you. And I'm glad that I discovered the site, and I'm glad that I got to talk to you finally, Jenne, after these years, and it's cool. I'm glad that we're able to reach out to people that are looking for a secular path to their recovery.
I just wanted, before you close, I just wanted to really give a shout out though to AA, because when we were going through this delisting process, I was contacting different, secular groups in my area. There are 6 AA free thinker meetings in San Francisco, and I visited all of them. They shared their scripts with me, shared their practices. And locally, there's like the Godless Heathens, in AA, and it's just been, everybody's been so like warm and welcoming, and and just, I don't know, all the literature that has been done by AA Agnostica, and I'm still unclear about how you got the 2 different websites, but anyway, all of you have really been there and showed us a path, so I just really appreciate it.
Ditto. Props to you personally, John, and all the people associated with AA Beyond Belief and AA Agnostica and the ICSAA, or however you say it, the convention folks. I'm looking forward to the first in-person, the next in-person conference is going to be in Bethesda, which is right down the street. I can walk to the hotel where it's going to be.
And I'm looking forward to when the virtual one is done, because it's kind of driving me crazy anyway. It'll be fun though.
I posted that to our discussion group that, for people to come, particularly the history session. I'm very interested.
Yes, that's an excellent panel, by the way. Yeah, that's going to be really amazing. Yeah, and the panel with Maria Hornbacher will be really good too. I mean, there's some really great panels on that. There's no doubt about it. I'm kind of joking about waiting for it to be done, because the organizing of it is a lot of, and it was all last minute too. It was like, we just put the schedule together literally last night.
I saw it. Well, in the what is her name again? I'm terrible with name. Hornbacher.
Maria Hornbacher.
That was another one, because I've run into her in your various websites and stuff, her work, and partially because she comes from an eating disorder background. I put that out, and a number of the women on the, in particular on the discussion group, were looking forward to that session on gender bias and so forth.
I'm a big fan of hers. Her writing is really, really, really good, and she is a very nice person. I just like her very much. So anyway, that'll be a good panel, and all that's going to be recorded too. So if you miss it, it'll be there later.
Oh, cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's it. That's another episode of AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. Thank you for listening. If you would like to support our website and podcast, there's a couple of things you can do. We're starting to get active on Patreon now. So if you want to become a patron, go on over to patreon.com/AABeyondBelief and become a patron. And what I'm doing is I'm posting little special videos just for patrons. It's like nothing special, but a little perk, I guess. And you can also become a member of our YouTube channel and kind of get the same kind of perks. But we would appreciate it if you can help. If not, that's okay too. We'll be back again real soon with another episode. And thank you very much, Jenne and Jim. It was a pleasure speaking with you both.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.